The movie begins with a narration that tells us how monsters came from other planets to cause chaos on Earth. After some days, a hero who called himself the Ultraman came from nowhere to defend the people from these monsters. For 30 years, he has been using his amazing powers to fight these monsters so as to maintain peace. Afterward, in Japan, we see a young boy called Kenji playing with his parents, Sato and Emiko. Sato is in fact the Ultraman who is often tasked with saving Japan from dangerous kaiju creatures. During their fun time, Emiko acts as the villain while Kenji acts as Ultraman. The family also has a robot called Mina, who helps them with the house chores. Emiko is a dedicated fan of the Japanese baseball league and wishes to see Kenji as a player. However, Sato wants Kenji to be prepared to become the next Ultraman, following in his footsteps. Their excitement is cut short when they hear an earthquake. Just then, Professor Onda warns Sato to protect the country because one of the most dangerous Kaiju Gigantron is on Earth. Sato decides to go fight this monster and tells his wife to protect Kenji. 20 years later, Kenji is all grown up, but unfortunately, his mom is no more as she went missing a long time ago. Kenji traveled with his mom to America where he joined the baseball team and became their best player, which made him really famous. After gaining immense popularity in American baseball, Kenji finally returns to Japan with the reason of joining a Japanese baseball league to fulfill his mother's dreams. But Kenji's return also has a second purpose as his dad is now old, and it's his responsibility to become the next Ultraman. His fans and journalists in Japan have so many questions for him, and he answers them with a sense of pride, aiming to win the championship this year. Just then, a reporter, Amy Wakita, asks about the disappearance of his mother, which makes him angry, and he leaves. He never receives an alert from his watch concerning a monster attack. He fights the Kaiju, who beats him quite badly as Kenji is holding back because the people want him to take down the monster with as little damage as possible. After some fighting, he does not hold back and unleashes his powers to land a punch on the creature. Just then, the Kaiju Defense Force captures the monster. They also warn Ultraman not to fight the creatures anymore because he is not an authorized government agent. Kenji notices that his suit battery is low, so he flies to an isolated place where he changes back to his normal self. He then sees that the KDF can't capture the monster on their own, but he is fed up with helping people who do not appreciate him and decides to go back to his normal life. His dad calls him and begs him to go back because it's his responsibility as Ultraman. But Kenji blocks his dad and decides to focus on baseball only. Meanwhile, in the Kaiju Defense headquarters, Chief Onda calls a meeting to discuss their plan of attack against the monsters. He talks about how each of them has lost family and friends from the devastation caused by the horrible attacks, and that is now going to come to an end. He explains that there is a very powerful weapon under production which will eliminate all monsters from their planet. On the other hand, Onda's men are seen bringing a case which they will use to complete the weapon, but a monster named Gigantron comes out from nowhere and attacks his men in possession of the case. Afterward, Kenji meets up with Wakita in her home to discuss his career and future aspirations. Wakita points out that even though Kenji has had a good career, he has yet to win a trophy. Once again, this makes Kenji angry, but just then, Wakita's daughter walks in, posing as the Ultraman. After he reaches home, Kenji trains for his upcoming baseball game, but he feels pain in his arm. His robot, Mina, informs him that his shoulder has been dislocated from the battle with the monster, which makes him wonder if the unappreciative people are worth losing his arm for. He decides to quit being the Ultraman and leaves that duty for the Kaiju Force Agency. Later, he starts his first Japanese game but isn't able to hit the ball because of the injury. He then decides to use his other hand to hit the ball and stuns the crowd by hitting a home run. His father also watches the game happily, but his mood changes when he receives an alert on a Kaiju attack. The attack reaches the stadium, which leads to everyone running for safety. But Kenji notices that Gigantron isn't attacking anyone, but it came to take back the case stolen by the Kaiju Defense Agency. Kenji, who doesn't understand the whole situation, changes to Ultraman and attacks the monster who poses a threat to everyone. The Gigantron, in retaliation, fights back with his atomic breath. In the agency headquarters, Dr. Onda orders to scramble all jets, kill Gigantron, and take back the case from it. Kenji then realizes what's going on between the agency and the monster. Gigantron doesn't intend to harm anyone but only tries to protect a case that the defense agency wants to take away from it by any means possible. As a result, it runs away holding the case while the jets of the agency chase after it. Ultraman tells the agency to leave the creature alone as it means no harm, but they warn to use deadly force on him if he interferes. Ultraman decides to try and convince the creature to let go of the case so the agents might leave it alone, but doesn't listen. Just as Dr. Onda orders, they fire hundreds of missiles at the monster, but Ultraman uses his shield to protect it. Unfortunately, the damage has already been done. The missile brutally injures the Gigantron and it dies in a few minutes. Ultraman takes the case to know why the creature was trying to protect it from the agency. He opens the case only to realize it's the egg of a monster. The egg hatches the very moment he touches it, and a cute baby of the Gigantron comes out from it. After observing that the agency is in search of the baby, Ultraman travels back to his basement underwater with the baby to keep it safe. Just then, the baby starts to continuously lick his chest. Mina tells him that the baby kaiju thinks Kenji is her mother and is trying to feed itself. Kenji panics as he is not ready for this kind of responsibility as a father. To avoid this, Kenji plans to take the creature to Kaiju Island, but Mina tells him that the said island is nowhere to be found. Just then, his Ultraman suit battery runs low and he changes back to his human form. The baby doesn't recognize him anymore and begins to cry. Mina tells Kenji that it's because she is scared of him as it's only his Ultraman form she knows. Afterward, Mina uses a containment pod to hold the creature. Meanwhile, Dr. Onda and his men arrive at the corpse of the Gigantron to discover that its egg has already gone missing. He tells his men to find the hatched baby and bring it back to him alive. Afterward, Kenji's dad pays him a visit, but Kenji is not happy to see him. It is then revealed that when Kenji was little, his parents got divorced because his mother wasn't able to put up with the pressures of her superhero husband any longer. It was the couple's decision to separate for the sake of their son, who never quite understood the reason for the separation. Kenji hates his dad because he believes that his father abandoned him for the sake of being a superhero. Later, the baby is still scared of Kenji, so he comes up with an idea. Kenji transforms into Ultraman and his human form multiple times just to prove to the creature that he is the same person, and this technique works as the baby stops to cry. He then hears the stomach of the baby grumbling. Mina tells him the creature must be really hungry. As per Kenji's orders, Mina brings a human meal for the creature to eat, but the food irritates the baby. The monster calls out toward the fishes in the ocean, and Mina explains that the baby might love fish. As a result, Kenji catches hundreds of fish and gives it to the baby. As the days pass, taking care of the baby begins to affect Kenji's routine, especially his baseball career. He doesn't sleep well to keep feeding the baby who is always hungry, and because of this, he is always underperforming in the baseball games. As a result, he not only lost a lot of fans, but his coach prepared to transfer him to another team. This gets Kenji angry and frustrated. To overcome this, he contacts Wakita to ask for her advice. Kenji knows that she has 2 kids, so he wants to know how she balances everything in her life. Wakita decides to teach him how to balance everything, but in exchange, he must fix an interview between them where he must answer all her questions. Kenji agrees, and thanks to her advice, he begins to bond more with the baby and teaches her how to play baseball. To fulfill the part of his deal, he goes to attend the interview with Wakita and tells Mina to take care of the baby while he's gone. After some time, the baby wakes up, and when it does not find Kenji around, it begins to cry. This leads to a strange blast coming out of her mouth. Mina tries to calm the creature by showing it pictures of Kenji, but doesn't work. The baby uses her new powers to break out of Kenji's basement and jumps into the city to look for her father. Meanwhile, while Kenji is doing the interview with Wakita, he receives an alert message about the baby in the city. Without wasting any time, he cancels the interview and goes after the baby, who is unknowingly causing chaos in the city in search of her father. Kenji finally finds it, but it unconsciously unleashes her powers on him. Meanwhile, Chief Onda finally finds the baby and sends all his men to its location. When his men show up, they begin to shoot numerous tranquilizers on the kaiju, which makes it unconscious. Onda then tells Ultraman to hand over the creature to them, and they will take no action against him. But instead, Ultraman escapes with the kaiju. The baby is in serious pain, so Kenji calls his dad, who knows a lot about these creatures. Kenji's dad finds out the baby just has a broken arm. With his walking stick, he fixes the creature's dislocated arm. After that, Kenji not only learns the importance of protecting kaiju species and their ecological benefits from his father, but he also realizes the fine balance that one needs to maintain while being a superhero and a parent at the same time. Seigo explains to his son, who still hates him, that he never wanted to leave to turn into Ultraman and fight monsters, but he was burdened by the very personal urge to protect his wife and son at all costs. On the other hand, Dr. Onda is looking for the baby desperately, as he plans to use it to create the super weapon. As per the doctor, the weapon will help him locate the island and can use it to wipe the monster creatures from Earth. He's on a revenge mission because the monsters killed his wife and children, his only source of happiness. Meanwhile, Professor Seto trains the baby how to defend itself, use its powers, and hunt its own meals. Thanks to Sato, Kenji starts to balance things in his life. He is no longer losing games and takes his team from the last to second position. Just as Kenji bonds with his father, they named the baby Ime. One day, they see hundreds of drones sent by Dr. Onda to capture the baby. Just then, the baby begins to enter its next evolutionary stage, which means that she's in her most vulnerable state. The drones release missiles on them and Sato gets hit by one of them. Kenji, out of anger, changes to Ultraman and destroys all the drones. The baby's evolution gets finished soon, and it turns out she has now developed wings. Dr. Onda then sends a robotic Gigantron mother that had been created in their lab in an attempt to reach out to the baby and convince it to switch sides. The baby leaves Kenji and runs to the robotic monster thinking it's her own mother. Kenji's house is destroyed by Dr. Onda's men, and even though Kenji survives, he is unable to find his dad. Kenji then goes to protect Imai from Dr. Onda and turns into Ultraman. He gets into a massive battle with the gigantic robot. Unfortunately, Kenji gets defeated and drowns in the ocean. Just then, Kenji's dad comes to his son's rescue in the form of Ultradad. On the other hand, the Gigantron mother also manages to get rid of Dr. Onda's control over it. With this, Dr. Onda decides to go with his last option. He tells his men to evacuate from the ship as he stays behind. He then transforms the ship into a gigantic robot, with him inside controlling it. The monsters assist the Ultraman in the fight, but they are no match for Onda. But when Kenji and his dad combine their powers with the monster's atomic breath, they take down the robot in a blast. As his end reaches near, Dr. Onda realizes that he will not be able to come out victorious in this fight, but still driven by his desire to kill as many monsters as he can to avenge his family, the mad doctor self-detonates his robot. Seeing this, Kenji decides to sacrifice himself in order to save everyone else, by using his Ultra Shield to stop the blast from reaching the city. Fortunately, he survives the blast, but at the cost of losing one of his arms. After some days, Wakita congratulates him on taking his team to the championship finals, but Kenji credits his parents for his success. Afterward, he leaves with Imai toward the Monster Island along with the Gigantron. In the epilogue, he gets a call from his supposedly dead mother. She states that she is alive and is at Nebula, the home planet of the Ultra species.